Liang Wei watched her hands tremble as she reached for the crystal water glass, her fingers pale against the opulent gold rim. Across the marble table in the most expensive café in Shanghai, his blind date Chen Yue sat in a worn cotton jacket that had been mended at the elbows, her eyes downcast as the waiter hovered expectantly with the menu. When she whispered her order, just warm water, nothing else, something shattered inside Liang Wei's carefully constructed world. This wasn't how blind dates were supposed to go. This wasn't the story he had imagined for himself. But sometimes the most profound moments in our lives arrive wrapped in the quietest gestures, in the simplest words, in the courage it takes to show up when you have nothing left to offer but your authentic self. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the beauty of seeing beyond appearances, please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and humanity to the world. Liang Wei had arrived at the Lumiere Café 30 minutes early, his tailored suit pressed to perfection, his Italian leather shoes gleaming under the chandeliers that dripped crystal like frozen tears from the Baroque ceiling. He had chosen this place deliberately. After 3 failed relationships with women who wanted him for his money, for his position as vice president at one of China's largest tech firms, for the Mercedes he drove and the penthouse he owned, he had decided to test this one differently. If she could keep up with him here, in this temple of excess where a single cup of coffee cost more than most people's daily wage, then maybe, just maybe, she would be someone who belonged in his world. His mother had arranged this meeting through a family friend. Chen Yue, they said, was a good girl from a good family, smart, kind, hardworking. But his mother had grown quiet when he asked about her background, about what she did, about why a woman in her late 20s was still unmarried. There had been something in his mother's eyes, a softness he couldn't quite interpret, but he had dismissed it. He dismissed a lot of things back then. When Chen Yue walked through the door, Liang Wei's first thought was that she had come to the wrong place. She moved through the cafe like a sparrow that had accidentally flown into a palace, her eyes wide, but not with admiration, with something closer to pain. Her clothes were clean but clearly old, the kind of garments that had been washed so many times the fabric had thinned to transparency in places. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, no designer handbag like every other woman in the room. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and when she spotted him and walked over, he noticed she was limping slightly, favoring her left leg. She sat down across from him with a quiet apology for being 2 minutes late. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but there was exhaustion in it, the kind that comes from carrying burdens too heavy for too long. When the waiter appeared with his practiced smile and flourishing menu presentation, Liang Wei watched Chen Yue's face carefully. He saw her eyes scan the menu, saw them widen almost imperceptibly at the prices, saw her throat move as she swallowed hard, and then she closed the menu gently and asked for warm water, just warm water, nothing else. The waiter's smile faltered. In a place like this, ordering only water was almost an insult, a disruption to the carefully maintained atmosphere of wealth and indulgence. Liang Wei felt his own face flush with something he initially thought was embarrassment. Was this woman trying to make a statement? Was this some kind of reverse psychology, playing poor to seem humble and win his sympathy? But then he looked at her hands, really looked at them. They were the hands of someone who worked with them, who used them for more than typing on keyboards or signing contracts. The fingertips were calloused, the nails cut short and unpolished. There was a burn scar across the back of her right hand, still pink and healing. And those hands were shaking, not with nervousness alone, but with something deeper, perhaps hunger, perhaps exhaustion, perhaps both. Something shifted in Liang Wei's chest. He heard himself order for both of them the tasting menu, the full experience. Coffee, pastries, sandwiches, everything the cafe was famous for. Chen Yue started to protest, her face coloring with shame, but he interrupted her gently. For the first time in years, he found himself speaking without calculation, without strategy. He told her he had already eaten at home and had ordered too much, that it would be wasted if she didn't help him. It was a lie that somehow felt more honest than any truth he had told in months. As they waited for the food, Chen Yue began to talk. Her story emerged slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. She had been a promising student once, studying literature, a good university. dreaming of becoming a teacher. But in her final year, her father had suffered a massive stroke. Her mother had died when Chen Yue was young, and there was no one else. She had dropped out to care for him, to work 3 jobs to pay for his medical treatments, his rehabilitation, his care. The family savings had evaporated within months. Their home had been sold. Now they lived in a single room in a building scheduled for demolition, and Chen Yue worked as a cleaner in office buildings, at night as a kitchen assistant in a small restaurant during the day, and took in mending work whenever she could find it. The blind date, she explained with quiet resignation, had been arranged by a neighbor who felt sorry for her. She had tried to refuse, knowing she had nothing to offer anyone, knowing she was trapped in a life of survival with no exit in sight. But the neighbor had been insistent, and her father had seemed so happy at the possibility that his daughter might find some happiness, some hope for a future beyond their cramped room and endless work. So she had come, borrowing bus fare from a coworker, wearing her best clothes. Even though her best was pitifully inadequate for a place like this, she had ordered only warm water because she had no money for anything else, and because her stomach had grown accustomed to being empty. This was supposed to be a brief meeting anyway, she said with a sad smile. She knew someone like him would take one look at someone like her and find an excuse to leave. She didn't blame him. She understood how the world worked. She just wanted to get through the meeting without causing too much inconvenience, then return to her father and her jobs and her life. Liang Wei sat listening, and with each word she spoke, something inside him was being demolished and rebuilt simultaneously. He thought about his penthouse with its unused bedrooms, his closet full of suits he wore once and forgot about, his car that sat idle most days because he preferred drivers. He thought about the women he had dated who complained about restaurant choices and vacation destinations and whether their engagement rings would be large enough to photograph well. He thought about his own complaints, his own dissatisfactions with a life that thousands of people would quite literally die to have. The food arrived, course after beautiful course, and he watched Chen Yue try to eat slowly, with dignity, even though he could see she was hungry in a way that went beyond missing one meal. She answered his questions with thoughtful intelligence, revealed a sharp wit, and a deep knowledge of literature and philosophy that came from someone who read voraciously despite having no time and no money for books. She borrowed them from libraries, she explained, during her lunch breaks, reading while she ate rice she had cooked in bulk on Sundays to last the week. When she spoke about her father, her face transformed. Despite everything, despite the exhaustion and the poverty and the endless struggle, there was love there, pure and fierce. Her father had been a good man, a factory worker who had made sure she got an education, who had believed she would do great things. She did not regret leaving university to care for him, she said firmly. She did not regret choosing him over her own dreams. Love meant sacrifice, and sacrifice meant staying when everything in you wanted to run. As the afternoon dissolved into evening, Liang Wei realized he didn't want this to end. Not because he pitied her. Pity was too simple, too small for what he was feeling. It was something else entirely. It was admiration. It was humility. It was the sudden shocking recognition that he had been searching for meaning in all the wrong places, measuring worth by all the wrong standards. This woman, who had nothing, who could offer him nothing by the metrics he had always used, possessed something he had lost somewhere along his climb to success. She possessed integrity, authenticity, and a capacity for love that was not transactional, not conditional, not calculated. When the check came and the waiter placed it discreetly on the table, Chen Yue saw the total and went pale. She started to apologize again, mortified, but Liang Wei simply paid it without comment. Then he did something he hadn't planned, something that surprised him as much as it clearly surprised her. He asked if he could meet her father. He asked if he could see where she lived, understand her life, not as a spectator but as someone who genuinely wanted to know. Chen Yue looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for mockery or ulterior motives, and finding none. She nodded slowly, and together they left the luxury cafe, stepping out into the honest chaos of Shanghai's streets where real life happened, where people struggled and survived, and sometimes even thrived, despite everything working against them. If this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that true wealth lies not in what we have, but in who we are and how we love, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and leave a comment below. Your engagement means the world to us and helps these stories reach more hearts. What happened next would change both their lives. Liang Wei began visiting regularly, first bringing groceries and supplies, then arranging for better medical care for Chen Yue's father, then quietly paying off their debts. But more than that, he began to show up, really show up. He helped Chen Yue with her father's physical therapy appointments. He read to the old man, listened to his stories, treated him with dignity and respect. He learned what it meant to be tired, to worry, to face each day not knowing if you would make it through, but finding the strength anyway. Chen Yue, for her part, taught him how to find joy in small things, a good book from the library, a meal cooked together in their tiny kitchen, the satisfaction of helping a neighbor, the peace that comes from living according to your values, even when no one is watching. She never asked him for anything, never expected anything, and that very absence of expectation cracked open something in Liang Wei's heart that had been closed for years. 6 months later, Liang Wei proposed to Chen Yue, not in a luxury cafe, but in that tiny room where she and her father lived, the three of them sharing tea and dumplings she had made by hand. He offered her not just his love, but his commitment to building a life based on the values she had shown him: authenticity, compassion, service, and love that was willing to sacrifice. On their wedding day, small and intimate with family and close friends, Liang Wei's mother whispered to him that she had known, had hoped, that Chen Yue would be the one to finally help him see what truly mattered. That was why she had arranged the meeting, despite knowing her son might initially reject someone who seemed so unsuitable by conventional standards. Years later, when people asked Liang Wei about the secret to his happiness, to the peace that seemed to radiate from him despite the pressures of his successful career, he would tell them about a blind date in a luxury cafe, about a woman who ordered nothing but warm water because she had nothing else to give. He would tell them how that moment of devastating honesty, that refusal to pretend to be something she wasn't, had saved him from a life of hollow success, taught him the only lesson that really mattered, that we find ourselves not by acquiring more, but by giving ourselves fully to loving and serving others. If this story has moved you, please comment below with a heart emoji. Let's fill the comments with love and remind each other what truly matters in this life. In the end, the blind date that was supposed to last 30 minutes had lasted a lifetime. And Liang Wei, who had thought he was testing whether Chen Yue belonged in his world, had discovered instead that he needed to learn to belong in hers, a world where warm water was enough, where love was measured not by what you could provide, but by your willingness to stay, and where the richest gifts came wrapped in the quietest, most humble packages. Sometimes we think we're looking for someone who measures up to our standards, when what we really need is someone who helps us measure up to theirs.